Hi, it's Paul again from Cognition. Now we've reached a point in our article on data sets to actually start writing the article. We've in the last video looked at how we analyze that article and draw out information that we could use for writing the article. It helped in our case because we had a specific goal, we had an idea of a topic that we wanted to do. But if you just had asked ChatGTP to analyze the data set and come up with some thoughts and insights, you'll probably find with most data sets it'll come up with numerous different angles and possibilities of articles that you can write, and then you can take that and run with that in the prompts that you ask ChatGTP or use on ChatGTP to provide information for. But we've gone with carbon capture and carbon sequestration for this tree data set. And it's provided us with the information or certain insights of information that we need. And now what we're going to do is construct the article. So the first thing we're going to do is we give it a title. Now I'd thought about this and came up with the title of Urban Forests Unveiled How London's Trees Are Battling Carbon Emissions. What I've asked it to do is, can you create a detailed article outline with sections and subsections? I'm asking for a structure, which again is important. The article needs to discuss both various factors that influence carbon sequestration. So I'm giving it again a bit of a framework as to how I want the article to look. Or certainly of what the article needs to contain. I also pointed out that in the previous videos we'd excluded certain data because it was incomplete, and so I'm just reminding ChatGTP, why am I doing that? Occasionally it's best to do that because it can ignore what we've previously discussed, so I always tend to do that. If you remember, we had included in our custom instructions some output um, parameters, and here I've asked it to write in Markdown because it's easier to post onto a website. If you speak to use WordPress, use a second person perspective. I'm trying to get it to write as humanly as possible, try to make it reasonably informative and professional, but with a little bit of what can one call it? Yeah, a little bit of creativity, just to lift it slightly, clear and straightforward. Various sentence structure for cadence. Cadence is very important when you're writing articles. Um, Cadence is the way a sentence is structured and the length, so you could have short sentences, long sentences, mixing things up a little bit. I like keep paragraphs to 90 words or shorter. Again, this is a bit more of a user aspect, when it's particularly if they're reading an article on a mobile phone. You don't really want paragraphs more than 90 words, otherwise it appears just huge blocks of text. And we've asked it to avoid generic fillers, descriptive language, etc., etc. I'll stick this down into the description of the video so you can have a better look at it. I mean, this usually varies depending on the type of article I'm trying to write. If I'm looking to target a specific keyword, I would then start putting in some more specific SEO requirements, but that's for another video. I think I'll probably do a complete video on custom instructions at some point. So GTP has responded, and it has produced me pretty comprehensive article outline, you see. So it's provided with introduction. Then the first section is it's talking about the whole principle of carbon sequestration, carbon capture, factors influencing it, which are incredibly important. London Borough comparative analysis, challenges and opportunities, and policies and future steps. Now, some of this we have to be careful of, as you'll see when we actually get to write the article, because you could end up with a situation whereby, without specific information, and we didn't have here, because this was written a few days ago, or because I ran this a few days ago, if I'd run it again now, you might get a more accurate input for this, because ChatGPT can at the same time now has been with its updated version can now you can use the data analysis tool, as well as web browsing and DALI all at the same time, which wasn't possible. You should have had to um, run various different chat prompts in different tabs to achieve that. Um, so so you can call on the web browser to check for some of this, because otherwise what happens is it tends to make assumptions, as we shall see, and you then have to be pretty careful. But then that then starts with the editing process of the actual article, because it's always advisable, doesn't matter what you're doing, ChatGTP is just a tool, you know. um, the finished article will depend upon you as a person. You have to read it, you have to look through it and make sure what is written is accurate, correct, to as much as you understand or can confirm, and also that it flows well, and isn't repetitive, which is what can happen a little bit with ChatGTP. So what I tend to do now is, at this point, I would well, in Ipswich I did. I went through sort of. I think it was pretty comprehensive. I mean, some of these sections, like, I mean, we could, and the science of carbon sequestration technically could be an article on its own, as can factors influencing carbon sequestration can be an article on its own. I mean, there is an argument to say that if you're writing an article, it should possibly be a little bit more focused, and we could leave these two sections out. But in this particular instance, I included them because maybe that the people reading it don't necessarily know much about these factors and would be interested if it's written in sort of like in an uncomplicated fashion. One could always write a secondary article in much more detail about each of these if necessary. So the only thing that I thought was missing is, or it never really gives this, but I like dynamic introductions when it comes to writing articles. I like to capture the reader's attention. So the first paragraph should, although, you know, in terms of SEO, you need to have your key phrases, etc., and key points in there. I like also to think of it from a user perspective, like anything, like a book or a newspaper article. What will get the reader to actually read the rest of the article? So I like a dynamic introduction. So what I've done here is I've asked it, can we write a dynamic opening just before the introduction? So I want it to be a little bit atmospheric, just to capture the reader's attention, hopefully. So it's gone with "Beneath the ever-evolving skyline of London, an ancient silent battle rages." It's a little bit flowery, but we can alter this, which is what I did, and I should show you the finished article in a minute. Um, but it's interesting language. Some, you know, for me, I think it is quite good. It does create some sort of atmosphere, and it does, you know, draw the reader in. Everybody's different. Some people might say it's not necessary. You don't have to do this. But and it's also what I wanted to pull out a key fact from the data set, or the analysis that ChatGTP has provided of the data set. And here it's talking about the London Borough of Enfield, you know, producing sequestration rates of over 80 kilograms of carbon dioxide per year. Now, what I did when I did the final article, as you shall see shortly, is I put caveats in, like estimated and things like that. I want to make sure that you know, it's not, we're not saying that this is exactly what the figure is, because it really is more of a guideline, more of a pathway to seeing exactly how London's trees can affect and which boroughs have the biggest potential for carbon capture. Providing exact figures is always going to be difficult and controversial, because without knowing the exact state of every single tree, irrespective of what's written on the data set, it's practically impossible to make definitive statements such as this. So always caveat these sort of figures unless you're absolutely sure they can be 100% relied upon. So it's given us that, and it's to be fair, the commentaries they run, you know, the ChatGPT seems to be now including, are quite interesting. So it's telling you why it's written the way it has. it's a dynamic opening. Now, what I wanted to do is to run through the different sections that we've got and look at building an article section by section. I like to build articles section by section. I could basically just say, write this article. ChatGTP 2 and it'll probably turn out about 1,000 words or 1,500 words, and it would be what I would call thin. Yes, it would do. Summary might even be useful for many people, but if you're looking for an in-depth article on this, it's probably not going to be good enough. So I tend to want to write each section. And the only problem with this is it tends to surmise at the end of each section as if it's written a whole article. So that's something you need to be careful of as well, as you shall see in a second. So, but my instructions are fairly clear. I've told it to use the parameters. Again, I'm calling it to remember, not always necessary, but it's better if you write these instructions so that you're prompting ChatGTP to make reference to what you've asked it to do. Then I've just copy and pasted the section from above. I've just edited it slightly. It is slightly different to what was put here. So it said overview of the critical role of forests, brief mention of study factors of trees, and what I've done here, I've got uh, brief carbon. It should say. I didn't write this properly actually, but it should say a brief information on carbon sequestration. Um, I just wanted to give an outline of what's going to come on in the rest of the article. I've also asked it to use as many LSI, latent semantic indexing, and NLP keywords. Again, this is basically this actually, because I just pulled a prompt that I always use this. Although I'm not necessarily targeting a specific keyword for this article, but it's always handy to use these because it helps Google rank and people search in different ways, obviously. So having these included is always beneficial. And I like them to be bolded. So here, for example, it's bolded all of the words that I wanted, or the LSI or NLP words, as you can see. And so it's produced an opening paragraph. Again, in some respects, it's slightly repetitive of what we've done with our opening dynamic paragraph. But what we can do is, again, we can edit this, as you shall see when I've written the final article. I've tried to edit it so it's not too repetitive. I mean, some of the language is possibly a little bit elevated. I maybe should have asked it to write for grade 8 or grade 9 sort of level. But I don't know. I'm hoping that the people that would read the article would still understand the language that was used. um, we can always change these words anyway if we think it's a little bit too complex, the language or the narrative. So, but it's written it well. It's not. It is a little bit AI uh, sounding, I suppose. Um, but it's an interesting article, and if somebody's reading it, I don't think they'd be too bothered, and maybe if anything slightly over long. But Dan, I did ask for 250, 300 words. I probably could have shortened that down a bit. But it's telling me what it's done. It said the introduction sets the stage for what we're going to look at, which is what I want to do. It highlights the contribution. Um, so the study unfolds the narrative of London leafy Guardian, sorry, mighty oaks mitigating greenhouse gases. Um, so, and it also is making sure that, because I did say somewhere, I think in it, to make sure that we have information, making sure that the reader does know that the data is not complete, because this is important, to them to realize that these are estimates, these are guides. What we're trying to do is paint a picture of London and its trees, and which boroughs have the best opportunity for carbon capture, which boroughs could probably improve, etc., rather than set precision, be precise about what we're trying to, what can be written. But as I said, it's better to be vague in certain things, particularly on specifics when it comes to this sort of thing, unless we can absolutely nail down precisely the right figures, which we can't do in this case. I think anybody could in this case. Uh, so then what I've done is we've gone to cut a long story short, we've gone basically section by section. The next section is short, but the following section is very long, so I split those sections up. So let's get into the next section. So we've got the introduction, then we've gone to writing parameters. Again, I've increased the word count for the second section, and again just copy and pasted their sectional information here, or the ChatGPT section here. And again, I've asked for LSI keywords and NLP keywords, but I've also asked it to include lists and possible tables. Now this breaks up the text, and Google seems to like lists and text tables. It's easier for the user also to read and pick out information, to be fair. So there's good reason for doing and including tables and lists, and thankfully it does a good job at following my instructions here. So we're talking about it's continuing the same theme in the way it's writing, which is good. It's using all of the NLP and LSI keywords that it thinks it should be used. Now, an alternative option would have been I could have run a search, possibly using a tool such as Perplexity and asking for maybe 100 LSI keywords, that key phrases that would match this. But I didn't really have a focus keyword in the first place, so that was what was complex. Even if one looks at the title that we go for, I mean, I suspect how London trees are battling carbon emissions, or London trees carbon emission effects. There are many ways one could have done this, but as I said, I wasn't really trying. I'm just trying it as an exercise rather than trying for attacking a particular keyword. So it's gone through. It's given me a couple of lists. Role of carbon intake, carbon storage, etc. Providing information on the benefits. Um, it's talking about knowing about the science can help, and then it's providing a table giving some sort of annual sequestration rates. Now, if you remember, we provided that information further up. Now, here is something that we need to pay attention to. Remember, I said in a previous video, ChatGPT can be forgetful. Now, I've increased the token count, but when you look at this, these figures are not the same as the figures that I imported all the way back here. Where are we? Here. They are different. So here we've got Oak 15. So it's making it up, or again, or pulling its own figures, rather than using the ones that we've listed, which can be complicated, because we've made our calculations on one set of figures, and I did say they were only a rough estimate figures. So, but here we've got Oak at 22. So we have to be consistent. So when I did this, as you shall see in the article, I changed this and made sure that these reflected the figures that we actually put in. This is what you have to read and make sure, because obviously it's forgotten. Maybe I could have written more clearly to make sure that we're using the data from the information we've already placed into the chat. I would have thought it should have done so, but it didn't. So then we went to the next section. Now here we had subsections. So what I did is I just got it to write subsections. Now, sorry, one other thing we got to, sorry, for the previous section, I talked about it having this urge to always summarize everything. In conclusion, we don't want that phrase at the end of a section. So you have to sort of adapt and edit your section endings so that they don't sound like you're summing up the whole article at the end of each subsection. That's an important point to remember. And again, so we just ran through this. Again, we got this, funny enough, it's pulled the same table here. So I didn't include the table twice, I only included it in one of the sections when I wrote the final articles, we shall see in a second. But again, I also varied it because it became a little bit repetitive. Because we've done some of this somewhere, or is it the next section that I shall see in a second? Um, Now we talk. The next subsection was the next two elements of the that they provided in our article outline. So we've got again, it provides the information we need. Again, we've got this in conclusion bit. This is not, we have to make sure that we knock these out before we publish it. Ironically, in this section, it didn't. It just said it wrote it in a way that one could include at the bottom of the article without too much editing. Um, but at least as you can see, what it's doing, it's following my instructions, providing with our bolded keywords. It's also providing us with our lists that we've asked for, and it's providing us with various tables. And we went on like this and went right the way through, as you know. You can read the full article in the end if you wish, but it followed the instructions relatively accurately, and actually produced a very good article in the end, on carbon capture of London trees. I think where we got to now, we ran into another problem here. You see, again, another thing is that it's tending to start as if each thing is an introduction as well. As the other, as way as another issue with regard to the conclusion that we pointed out. We've also got the in summary here. We got the word in summary. We don't want that. So so, so we have, there is editing that needs to be done, but it's minor, and it's just trying to make the article better for the reader. I mean, you could probably get away throwing it in on the basis that not many people are going to read through 4,000 words of article, which is what this ended up being, 4,500 in the end. And I think I left bits out. Purely because it could have gone on up to 6,000 words. I mean, we could probably written a book on it, to be brutally honest. But what we're trying to achieve here is, you know, interesting facts that people can pick out. And so when I've written the final article, and we will get there in a second, I promise you, I've obviously included a table of contents, and people can pick and choose where they want to pick up an article. So there's an argument that you could make it a little bit introduction and conclusion to a section, but still, if somebody did read the whole article, it wouldn't read very well. So you've got to balance that up. Now, this is where we ran into slightly different problems. I asked, we've gone into the next section here, which was the sequestration champions eye, which are the best boroughs. Now, we already know Enfield stands out, but when we started reading through this, it didn't mention Enfield, it mentioned Richmond, upon Thames, and Greenwich. Now, if we go back to our figures, all the way back up here, sorry about that. Richmond is here, it's the 14th, and Greenwich is the 16th. Hardly top of the list with regard to the amount of sequestration. Maybe in terms, we can look at it in other terms, but probably if one has read the first part of the article, they might be surprised to find out. And I didn't keep these bits in, but I varied it a bit. So what I did is I knew Enfield was the key, was, or had some of the best. Um, where are we? So I knew Enfield had the best sequestration rates or carbon capture rates. So what I did here was to create a secondary section. I let it go through and write the rest of the section, and again, it talked then about Islington, Kensington, and Chelsea. Islington is quite an interesting borough because it's very small, but has a huge amount of trees for its size. So there's an argument for writing. But Kensington and Chelsea, the argument here is it has, again, it's not really particularly cool, and these figures again are wrong. So, and you can see, you don't even need to look, they're wrong. So what we had to do is again go back to our original lists and correct the information. As I said, you must pay attention to what's been written. I know it sounds like a complex process, but it's going to produce a good article. And it's not really that much work if you think about it. You just copying and pasting the correct information in. It's just making sure you're consistent with what you're saying, because otherwise anybody who did actually ever get to read the whole article would pick this out of them immediately and know that, well, this isn't, how can I, accept the facts, what's written in this article if, you know we're in a situation whereby the information varies from paragraph to paragraph. It's just not going to work, is it? So, um, so that's that. So when I got through to, yeah, we're going back down. I decided I wanted it to write a study in the borough of Enfield because that made more sense. And it gave me this huge outline that could have written a whole article on each borough if we'd have wanted to. Just shows you what one can do with a simple data set. There's probably, you could probably write about 30, 40 articles from this if you really wanted, borough by borough, overview, etc. If you're interested in the trees of London, so to speak. So what I said is, great, no problem. But initially, I wanted an article just summarizing it. So it gave me, again, a decent overview. Simply, continually using the same words is it's like problematic. It's another reason why you need to read through these just to check. These are giveaways as to it being written by AI. Uh, so I mean, I've asked it in my customer not to use the same 4 words in a row, but sometimes just using the same word more than several times, particularly if it's an unusual word, stands out a mile. Um, again, careful editing is required. So it provided Enfield, and I put this in, and then I edited what I had written, what was written in the previous sections, and finally it went through and we went through the data gaps, which I thought was important. So I asked it about data gaps and then making sure that that was included in the article. Um, Again, it's giving me my keywords, and it's also giving me my tables. And finally, it started here where we started to get into the realms of, I don't know whether this is really accurate, because without references to public policies and community engagements, can we really write? I mean, you can write in a general sense, but you can't say. I mean, I did include some of this, but what I didn't include was specifics to certain boroughs, that this borough's policy was this and this borough's policy was that, because ultimately I didn't know, and it was it's difficult to include that sort of information. But eventually we got down to where we get to the conclusion. I mean, it goes on and on, this article. So as I said, it was huge. Eventually we get to the conclusion. There we are. And it wrote me again a longer. I think I cut this very, very short. But we'll go across to the article now and have a look. Okay, so this is the article at the end of the day, and this is how it was written. Again, as you can see, I made some slight changes to the dynamic introduction. All of the sections are clickable, which made it interesting. I also, by the way, included the tables that we'd calculated in our analysis at the bottom, plus a few references. I went and found some references, some information, just to make sure that everything was correct. So I think we got to London Borough challenges, comprehensive analysis, standout boroughs. So here we got back down to this one because this is the last thing we're talking about. So when we talked about London Borough, if you remember, we in our previous video showed you some charts that we created. I included those in there, which make it look interesting. Included the information on London borough of Enfield. Again, if you noticed, I changed the way it started the paragraph. But again, I'll leave the link there at the bottom so you can have a look. And you remember that table we had when I said was clearly wrong. I just obviously went and pulled the information from the table that we'd already done. If we look at species strategies, okay, so then and included then I varied a bit of information about Richmond and stuff and pulled out the information that was useful. So instead of talking about it as being, standout boroughs where they did have some interesting advantages, was the different number of different species that some of these boroughs had. So like Greenwich and Southwark, and it gave some interesting information. Now we then went through the data gaps, which we've just seen, looked at urban forest management, and instead of have a conclusion, I just put his final thoughts. As you can see, this is much shorter than the conclusion that we wrote. We could have done policies without publication. I mean, all of these is fair enough, but and closing calls to action, not really that necessary. But as I said, this article, as you can already see, is pretty long. Uh, but I did include the tables that we calculated and the references for the thing. But I again made sure that we highlighted the fact that these were just estimated figures, and it's more like creating a outline or a pathway or whoever you wanted to call it, to give an idea of the potential for carbon sequestration and carbon capture that trees have, and which boroughs are performing well and which boroughs could probably improve or plant more trees for that matter. Can that be done in every borough? Probably not, because of the nature of some of the boroughs, but certainly some of the outlying boroughs in London. If you don't know London, some of them are quite green and leafy, and have quite a lot of open space. Some of the obviously central London boroughs are going to be more problematic, but even there's possibilities. As you said, vertical greening seems to be something that comes up. But there we go. I shall leave a link to the article below, and I hope you found the process useful. I'll probably do another video on um, using data sets for creating articles. Probably use a much smaller data set because this was huge and very, very complex, but it was still worth doing, and certainly worth doing the video for those who are interested in creating complex data sets and building out articles from these data sets. But anyway, thank you for watching.